Over Christmas and New Year 2011, we had a holiday in South America. We flew first via Madrid to Buenos Aires for a couple of nights, then south to Ushuaia to tour around Patagonia, and finally back via Buenos Aires to Iguazu to see the falls. Buenos Aires is a city crisscrossed by enormously wide avenues and overlooked in the centre by a large image of Eva Peron. On Sunday mornings they have a very popular cycle rally, but generally the roads are packed with heavy traffic like most cities. Our hotel was very close to this main pedestrianised shopping area, Florida Street, with a mix of everything from street market stalls to this very modern indoor shopping centre. The so-called English Tower was a gift from the city's British community in 1916. Somewhat strangely, Argentina built its memorial to those who died in the Falklands War in 1982 directly opposite the English Tower. We had good weather throughout our stopovers in Buenos Aires, and we ate some wonderful steaks, including one at one of the many good restaurants in this redeveloped port area. Recoleta Cemetery is where the wealthiest Argentine families are buried. There's an amazing variety of architectural styles, but the main reason most people visit is to see the crypt of Eva Peron, whose maiden name was Duarte. This building, the Casa Rosada, is the presidential palace. It was from one of these balconies that Eva Peron made her famous speeches. Although the national language is Spanish, about half the European immigrants came from Italy, and many of them settled in the very colourful district of La Boca. Argentina is a vast country, and our flight south to Ushuaia took over 3.5 hours. Ushuaia is on the southern shore of the island of Tierra del Fuego, which is separated from the mainland of South America by the Magellan Strait. Most cruises to Antarctica set off from Ushuaia, but we took a rather more modest boat trip along the Beagle Channel. We were taken up close to several of the small islands in the channel for great close-up views of seals and seabirds, with the mountains in the background. Our holiday was run by the tour company Explore, and there were a group of 14 of us, plus an Argentinian tour manager, Guadalupe. We spent 2 nights in Ushuaia, staying in a very disappointing and basic hotel. We got off the boat for a walk on one of the small islands, and had our first experience of the extremely strong winds which we were to discover are very common in Patagonia. This post office was the starting point for a gentle walk we took the next day along the shoreline in part of the Tierra del Fuego National Park. The weather and the visibility were perfect. Among the many birds we saw that day were an uplands goose, and several cormorants. Our 600-mile road journey to the Torres del Paine National Park took us north from Ushuaia, across the border into Chile, and over the Straits of Magellan by ferry. Once over the mountains near Ushuaia, there were hundreds of miles of fairly flat, featureless countryside, with occasional pockets of trees and wild lupins. After an overnight stay in Punta Arenas, we continued north to Puerto Natales, and a visit to the Milodon Cave, named after a long-extinct mammal whose remains were discovered here. Soon afterwards we had our first sighting of the Torres del Paine mountain range. We stayed in one of these cabins just outside the national park for 3 nights, and the views were stunning. On the first of our 2 full days here, I, along with about 2/3 of the group, did a 12-mile walk, while Margaret and others did some shorter walks and sightseeing around the national park. The walk that I did was about 6 miles each way, climbing to a viewpoint. Most of the way it was a fairly steady, gradual climb, along a river valley and through woodland. But the last hour of the uphill section of the walk involved a really quite steep climb up this rocky slope on the left. At the top we were rewarded with a really wonderful clear view of the granite towers rising out of a glacial lake. The weather was fantastic and the sun very strong. Unlike us, Margaret and her group experienced very strong winds everywhere they went. She took some video on her camera while visiting waterfalls. While waiting for us hikers to return, Margaret and the others observed a skunk, determinedly trying to break into a refuse container. On our second day at Torres del Paine, we spent the morning touring around the park, admiring the scenery and taking a shortish walk. It was exceptionally windy, but sunny and clear and not too cold. In the afternoon, we visited Grey Lake in the northwest of the park. We took a walk alongside the lake, where large pieces of ice that had broken off the glacier at the far end had come ashore. As we were leaving Torres del Paine the following morning, we saw quite a lot of wildlife. These are guanacos, a type of llama, and these are rheas, which are rather like Australian emus. We also saw quite a few condors, although mostly too far away to photograph. Our coach journey to El Calafate took us back into Argentina, crossing at a very quiet border post in the middle of nowhere. After a drive across featureless countryside, with snow-capped mountains in the very far distance, we arrived in El Calafate. It's a pleasant town, with quite a few touristy shops and some good restaurants. Mainly the town is used as a gateway to the Perito Moreno Glacier at the southern end of the Los Glaciares National Park. In the morning, we took a boat trip for a close-up view of the face of the glacier. Its scale is hard to comprehend. The glacier is one of the few in the world that's growing rather than shrinking. It covers 97 square miles, and its face is 3 miles wide and towers 240 feet above the surface of the lake. We spent the afternoon exploring the very extensive set of walkways overlooking the glacier. We saw quite a few large pieces of ice fall from the face of the glacier, but you could never tell where the next bit was going to fall, and we kept missing photographing them. Until finally, a 3-hour drive the next day took us to El Chalten and the Fitzroy mountain range at the northern end of Los Glaciares National Park. The organised walk from El Chalten was a round trip of 16 miles, and with a climb of 3,500 feet. Half of us in the group did the walk. Margaret and some others stayed behind for a more relaxing day. The intrepid amongst us set off in glorious sunshine along a wide glacial valley, and then progressively more steeply up rocky paths, until eventually, at the end of the trail, we reached a beautiful lake with a wonderfully clear view of Mount Fitzroy. Walking down the steep rocky slope was the hardest part of the walk, and I was exhausted by the end, but glad I'd done it. The following day, Margaret and I both opted out of the organised walk, and had a more relaxing time, admiring the local flora and fauna, enjoying the wonderful weather, and most of all, taking in the breathtaking scenery. That was the end of our wonderful tour of Patagonia, but we still had one more delight to come, We flew north, back to Buenos Aires, and then on to Puerto Iguazu to see the amazing Iguazu Falls. The Iguazu River marks the border between Argentina and Brazil, and on our first afternoon here, we were taken across into Brazil to see the falls from the Brazilian side. You get a great panoramic overview of the falls from a high-level walkway here, and this walkway built out over the river takes you in close to the bottom of the area known as the Devil's Throat. For those who want to get really close to the falls, there are boat trips available. We also saw a little wildlife on our half-day visit to Brazil. We spent the whole of the following day exploring the Argentinian side of the falls. There's a train that takes you from the car park to a set of walkways at different levels to get differing perspectives of the many parts of the falls. These were easily the most impressive waterfalls we've ever seen. And we saw some more wildlife along the way. These creatures are coatis. They look quite cute here, but many of them are real pests, scavenging for food from tourists. And then it was time to return home, at the end of a fabulous 2.5-week holiday.